Great. Hello, everyone. My name's Melanie Rupp, and I'm the Director of Loans and Advisory Services for Women's Enterprise Center. If there's a topic you'd like us to consider on a future forum, then please be sure to complete the follow-up survey and share your ideas. We're always looking for new ideas that are relevant to you. Women's Enterprise Center is a nonprofit organization devoted to helping women start, lead, and grow their own business. Our full range of services include business loans up to $150,000 with access to an additional $100,000 through a new partnership with BDC. We also provide business advice, skills training, mentoring, resources, and a supportive community to help women entrepreneurs realize their business potential. We do this from 3 offices located in Kelowna, which is our head office, Vancouver, and Victoria. Although today, in this current scenario, we're all working remotely from home, as many others are as well. Our passion is to empower entrepreneurs to their business success. We're funded by the federal government through Western Economic Diversification and part of the Women's Enterprise Initiative, which includes similar organizations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. You can learn more on our website at wec.ca. Danielle, next slide. Now on to today's session. Our topic today is accessing grants, and we're really pleased to have Stephanie Sang, the CEO of Granted Consulting, with us. And we also have one of her clients, Donna, with us, who will be introduced more formally later. During this session, you'll learn updates on new government programs, tips for integrating COVID-related resources to sustain your business, what can be used for your business and how you can leverage it, and what type of grant funding is available for COVID recovery. So now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Stephanie. Welcome, Stephanie, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mel, for that introduction. I guess I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, great.
Okay, perfect. Danielle, I just need you to hit the stop share for a sec. Okay, perfect. There we go. All right. So excited to do this mentor advisory session. What we've done at Granted in the last few years has evolved quite a bit, and also really supportive of women entrepreneurs in the province and across the country. So I know that today it's tight on time. I want to make sure everybody gets the information that they need. One thing I should mention is there's a introduction of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which will be opening for applications on the 27th of April, on Monday. And just immediately after this webinar, I will be doing an in-depth webinar on how to actually apply for it. We go through full calculations and stuff. So just in case that's something of interest, we wouldn't be able to cover it. There's a lot of information on it. And so we wouldn't be able to cover it here today, but please feel free to join in on a back-to-back webinar with us. And that's the sign-up.
Great,
for that.
thank you.
Mm-hmm. So just a couple of things to note. This article came out by the Globe and Mail in 2018 in the fall. And the article in summary said that there are 4,500 grant programs that are available in Canada. And of course, that's not just for small business grants. There's definitely programs for nonprofits. There's also ones where municipalities or associations such as Women Enterprise Center would be able to access. But the total that they mentioned in this article was $26 billion. So let's stop and think about that for a sec. If only 10% of that went to businesses, that's already $2.6 billion. And I know that sounds small compared to all of these COVID resources that are being launched in the 70s and the 20 billions and all this other stuff. What we're looking at right now, and unfortunately for us taxpayers, is it does look like, based on the National Post article a couple of weeks ago, that we're at $184 billion debt in terms of deficit, and $107 billion in COVID resources plus the initial announcements that were made within the last week or so, which is another 14 or 15 billion, things like for students impacted by COVID, as well as IRAP funding and some of these things that you've been hearing in the news. So the budget for grants or non-dilutive funding has really exploded as a result of COVID. And right now we're looking at recovery more than anything else moving forward, but also sustainability of existing businesses to get you guys through this. So, one of the key things that I thought would be super attractive to this webinar is to talk about grants for women. And Danielle and I were on a call a couple of weeks ago or a week ago talking about this. And so the main question that I get from a lot of females is, where are the grants just for women? And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't quite work like that. So we're going to go through a little bit of, are there grants by demographic? Absolutely. I will say that the Indigenous community is a great example of where, if you are a particular demographic, there's specific grants for that. But we're in a country of democracy, and proudly so. And so one of the things that the government also has to be careful of is not skewing funding to a particular gender. And so often what we will say is, it's not about the gender. It really is about the support that women can get, things like Women Enterprise Center and the amazing programs that are accessible to women-owned businesses, but not accessible to our male counterparts, right? So those are different support programs. There's a ton of mentorship programs that have been established and supported by the government as well. So in that way, there are programs, but if we say non-dilutive, which means that it's something where it's not like the government's investing dollars and you have to give them dividends for it. And if we're saying non-repayable, so that means it's not like a loan where it's just funding that you get and you don't have to pay it back. It's a little bit more limited. Some of you may also know of the Women Entrepreneur Fund, which I'll cover in a minute. That was one program in my history of 9 years of doing grant consulting that popped up that was just for women. So I also want to explain that it's not the norm, okay? But the good news is, look at all this money that's available for you. So the grants are really set up in 4 primary buckets in Canada: hiring grants, training grants, market expansion programs, and research and development. And so what I'd like to do is, to avoid having too much information on the slides, I'd like to talk through these programs a little bit first. So let's talk about hiring grants. This is probably one of the most accessible programs for businesses of all stages and of all sizes as well. And so the hiring grants are really kind of geared towards, this is where you see a little bit of pickiness on demographic. The government wants to provide support to those who are a little bit more challenged to find ongoing sustainable work. And the first group that was identified, and this has been the history of me establishing Granted, has been youth. Those people who are under the age of 30 tend to have a little bit more of a upper hand on grant programs in order to get them integrated into the workforce at a younger age. So think of the recent grads or co-op students. So that's kind of an area that we would be able to find some more grant funding on. It's harder, definitely, to get those who already have 20 years of work experience in the workforce or 30 years and be able to access funding other than things like an EI program where they might have taken some time off because of an injury, or maybe they were coming off a maternal or paternal leave. And so they're maybe a little bit rusty in their skills to get back into the workforce. Those types of programs through EI are not, there's no requirement in terms of age, but most other programs, those who have disabilities, recent immigrants, like that's kind of where it stands. So what do you need to prepare for a hiring grant? You need to make sure you have a good job description. You need to make sure that you are recruiting the right type of candidate. So don't go to, say, for example, like a general job board like Indeed or Monster, if they're still around, or Workopolis or whatever it is, and then just put a posting up and expect that someone under the age of 18 or the age range of 18 to 24 would be able to immediately identify with that particular job, especially if you put things in the job like you need to have 6 years of work experience. Well, youth are immediately just not going to look at this job posting. So you need to be careful about how you put it up. Training grants, look at all the amazing trainings that you can get. It could be fundamental training and technical. It could be even soft skills. And that's an area the government has really warmed up to in the last few years, is recognizing the need for communication skills, conflict resolution skills, even mindfulness. We've gotten funding granted for a mindfulness course, for instance. So leadership, not just training our staff, but making sure, we're so fortunate in BC that the training grant allows business owners to partake. So making sure that you are upskilling yourself, because upskilling your team is one thing, but you want to make sure that you continue to push for continued education in your organization. Market expansion, make sure that you absolutely have things like, what is the market you want to go to? Who are the partners that you would work with? Do you have the statistics about that particular market? Don't just say, I'm going to take my crackers and export it into Japan, and then you're hit with a bunch of companies that do rice crackers and they're all gluten-free and all this, and then you come with something that is not really applicable to that market per se. And so you do want to make sure you have your statistics. You want to have a little bit of a marketing plan, a strategy to go into it. You also want to make sure that you have staff or contractors who can actually help you with it. There is nothing worse than setting up for a market expansion grant, getting the money, and then not being able to execute those activity because you don't have enough people to run your business and do an expansion. So just a couple of things that you should think about there. There's also programs for working with partners. So the next slide, we'll talk about the actual names of these programs. And again, these programs change on a regular basis. So just make sure that you're constantly looking at what those changes are, and you can adapt your application based on before you apply to make sure that you meet the criteria. A bucket that is huge in Canada research and development. Now, I want to be really clear about what this means. Research and development is not changing your muffins from blueberry to chocolate chip. Okay, it's a great thing, but it's not research and development in the eyes of the government. So it's very important that the research and development has a spin of innovation. There's many programs that are grant related. We're seeing more of them, especially through COVID as well, where they're pairing up industry with institution and research. And so maybe there's a school helping you with some of the research so that you can get the data or whatnot required for your product. And so those are different collaboration types of things that you'll see in the market. There's recent programs like the digital superclusters and superclusters in general, which is a huge bucket of funding that will also allow for integration and collaboration. And then, of course, the biggest of all of these buckets is tax credits. And so tax credits aren't grants. I just want to be really clear, and maybe I can add a clarifying point to that. Grants and funding support, where it might be a matching contribution or what the government likes to call funding contributions, they usually require where you would apply for it, and then you would get an approval, and then you go and execute these activities. Tax credits are done backwards. So you don't know that you're going to get money, and you do your research and development. CRA or somebody will determine that you qualify because you've written up a paper saying this is the innovation, these are the tests that we're doing. And then on the back end of it, you can claim some of that funding back. And it's quite lucrative if you do qualify for it. But again, the key is innovation. Make sure that you do not put something through that to them might seem standard. So back in the day, in the 90s, if you were building a website, you could absolutely apply for SR&ED tax credits and IRAP and all of these other programs through the National Research Council. Nowadays, if you say, hey, I'm building a WordPress website, they'll say, good, goodbye. So you just got to make sure that you meet the requirements there. So why would the government put money here for these buckets? Well, the job of the government is to ensure job creation and job protection. So remember, a lot of these wage subsidies that are coming up through COVID is to protect the workforce, to ensure that the layoffs are not impacting them in a huge way. Upskilling the workforce, how amazing would it be to have more people highly educated in Canada? We're already really top in many of the developed countries in education, but Canada is 100% supportive of that, so that's amazing. market expansion and making sure that there's tax revenues coming back is important. And then of course on the innovation side of things. So that's another area. This slide I'm not going to go through.
Stephanie, can I just maybe jump in here? So
yeah.
I have some clients who have been accessing the various grants that you've been talking about. It seems that often the companies are already involved in the space, so the companies that are talking to the supercluster are companies that the supercluster is somewhat aware of or is in the industry. So, sure. Can you talk a little bit or just quickly mention anything about when you're going for these grants, do you have to already be involved in the industry rather than a startup or someone new getting in?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think for the two buckets on the right side, it definitely does help. So if you're looking at market expansion grants and research and development, knowing who your ITA is, and for those who know IRAP, it's the Industrial Research Assistance Program. And so it really helps startups in early stage. And so you do want to build a relationship with them. But it also is like, don't be fearful to not go and develop that relationship. I applied for IRAP because we have a technology that we built. I didn't get in under funding that way, but their resources, like when I sat down with my ITA and I just said, this is what I want to do, there were certain things that he said that actually pushed me to pivot the technology a little bit. And it's because he sees hundreds, if not thousands of companies. And so please don't be hung on, just, oh, it's the money. It's not. It sometimes is the value. And that's the case with Women Enterprise Center. It's not about the loan. And Mel, you and I have spoken about this in depth before as well. It's about the support system and the community and the ability to tap into resources like this webinar. So I want to make sure that you guys are on, one of the steps that we'll talk about is on these mailing lists so you stay informed, but reach out and get involved. Like superclusters, I'm involved with that as well. There's no way that superclusters will ever come to me and say, can you guys build this amazing thing? There's no way. But I think that if I didn't put my hand up and say I'm in and learn a little bit about it, it's going to be hard. So I'd
also just say that Women's Enterprise Center on the exporting side, so Can Export, those are programs that we often refer clients to who work with our specialized export advisor.
Yeah. And, you guys have it as well. SBBC has a export navigator program. The World Trade Center has their own export, program. The TAP program. Yeah. So that's so many resources out there. Make sure that you do leverage them. But also know this, they're not going to write the application for you. Okay, so
exactly.
This stuff, it does require a little bit of heavy lifting on your end, unless you work with a firm like us or you have a business consultant or a third party helping you with it. So it's really important, you're putting your name on this, it's your company, it has to be driven by you. It doesn't matter what other people say. They can be third party consultants on, and doing their own thing. But what's really important is, how does this program add value to your business? Okay, so this is kind of a synopsis of kind of what's available. I'm not going to be putting all the programs on here. We at Granted research between 80 and 120 programs and are on top of these programs throughout the year. And they will come up and they'll be gone, and they'll come up and they'll be gone. So I've moved them kind of into buckets in this area. I'm going to touch on a couple. Like if you guys are doing training, the employer training grant, 100% you guys need to be looking at. I'm also working with a lot of employers who, through the COVID situation, are saying, I can't give my staff enough hours, but I do want to put them on the wage subsidy and I want to ensure that their income is supplemented. The challenge there is, well, why don't you use the employer training grant and get them training that they could use so that when you do recover, you guys can hit the ground running? And you would be ahead of all the companies that unfortunately either had to lay their staff off and or lost staff as a result of COVID, where they're 2 steps behind. So make sure, this whole thing of COVID recovery is not just when the grant runs out. It really is, or the wage subsidy run out. You should be thinking about these things now, and then being able to adopt, could you get a co-op grant and get the wage subsidy? I have the answer to that. The answer is yes. And it depends on which program. So now you're getting 100% of these wages covered. All those who miss the Canada Jobs, Summer Jobs Grant, put your hand up. this is the program. This is a student program for you guys, okay? So I have Donna Chang from Wakefield. Oh, sorry.
Can we just go back for a second? We do have a question from the floor about these.
Sure. Okay.
The question is, for a self-employed person, is it required to have a business license to apply for any of these listed?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to say this. The government wants to give money away to people who meet the requirements of what the government's asking for. So in the city of Vancouver, my understanding of it, and I'm not a lawyer, so you need to speak to the city of Vancouver, but in the city of Vancouver, my understanding is there's only a sliver of companies that don't need a business license to operate in Vancouver. And a couple of the ones that kind of have floated past me are in examples like a real estate agent. I know that for a fact because my husband is a realtor, so he doesn't need a business license because he's registered through the BC Realtor Association, okay? But when you look at the employer training grant, 2 years ago, they popped up, I need to see 2 years of business licenses. And I would say 30% of our clients were like, why do they need that? We're registered in the province, we're incorporated, we work from home, we don't have a business license. And I will say, that's actually not legal. So if you're not operating in the requirements under the government, then why would they give you money? What about these, these other loan programs where people are like, oh, I'm just going to apply for example, the Canada Emergency Business Account, which is the $40,000 loan at 0% interest through the COVID parts. Why do they need people to be paying on T4s and make sure that they report salaries? Why do they need to do that? Because those people are paying taxes. And so then they're going to get a benefit. And so those are kind of the things that we're seeing a lot more of. The government's getting smarter. Systems are connected. And so if you don't meet one or the other, that's a problem. A third thing I'm going to mention really briefly is registering in the province. We have a sheet that you can download off our resources page where it tells you, here are the 5 things you need to ensure you do to get started with grants. And the first thing is make sure you register your business properly. onestop.gov.bc.ca. I have it memorized because I say it so many times. It's so easy to register your business. It's $75 as a sole proprietor to do a name check and to do your registration. And if you don't have that, the chances of you being able to apply for up to $10,000 in training grants is gone. And so please make sure you guys register for your businesses and pay the necessary dues, because it's a difference of getting thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars versus getting nothing. So great question, Danielle. And I had a little coffee, and so I love grants and I get excited. So I apologize for the animation, but that's me.
No, that's great. And I do have one more question that came through, and they are coming fast. So if we don't get to your questions as we go, we'll definitely reserve some time at the end. But this one is quite topical for what we're on topic here. So for the ETG, what if you want to get a grant to develop training to offer companies? Does it work that way?
No, unfortunately not. So the onus of a lot of these programs is that if you are a trainer seeking to develop a program, that is actually an operational cost in the eyes of the government. Even if you are doing a training, let's say, for example, a corporate business says, hey, I want you to do this communication training, but I want you to tailor the course that you currently have. The cost of tailoring that course is also ineligible. So you've got to make sure that you are, could you wrap it into the cost, what you charge maybe, because maybe you had to take another course or you needed to develop a bunch of stuff, but then it's a different course. So just be really careful. The government is all about supporting companies being able to diversify, pivot, do different things to ensure stability in the company and growth, but they don't love paying for things like capital expenditures and any operational types of costs. Rent, salaries, very difficult to kind of get covered unless they are new hires. So moving someone from one position to another, if they've been on a T4 or they're on payroll, it doesn't work that way often. Okay, I'm going to say there's always exceptions. I'm talking 95% of the time. Okay, great. Thanks for that. I'm going to move on. I do have a good amount of time for questions later. So, but I think the story that Donna has is very important. I met Donna a few years ago at an amazing women's conference down in Texas. She's here in Vancouver locally. And I just loved how she ran her business and really wanted to support her. And so I've seen Donna's company, Wakefield Agency, start from just a production company to now an agency. And what they do is they help with marketing strategies and developing visual storytelling. And they've done videos for us at Granted as well. And it really, the move in the last couple of years has been serving impact-based businesses and organizations. So Donna, I've got some questions for you just to kind of make sure that our audience, sorry, I'm just clicking through my question here. There you go. So yeah, maybe you can just briefly tell us, like, how long has your business been around? How many employees do you have?
Right. Hello, everyone. So our business has been around for 9 years, and we've been incorporated for about maybe 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we have 4 employees, including me and my partner, my husband, who both run the company together.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the audience is thinking about, could I apply for grants, but I don't know about this or that. So what were some of the expectations that you had about grants?
Well, I mean, my first reference to grants was when I was in university. And that sort of was something that I felt like, I don't know, special people had access to. I didn't know how to access them. And later on, when I started running my business, I also again felt like, okay, there are grants out there, but I don't know if they're for special people or elite people, or like, what about everyday people? And so there was always a bit of that gap. And that was maybe a little bit of a unconscious bias, perhaps. But yeah, I just kind of knew they were there, but I didn't really go after or look for them.
Yeah. And, you've been leveraging grants in 2015. So over the last 5 years, can you tell everyone are you comfortable telling everyone how much funding you've gotten over the last 5 years?
Yeah, because it's also on your slide. It's $181,000. And about just over 50,000 of that were specific training grants. And the other part, about 128,000 or so, was in market expansion grants. 100,000 of which was from the wec, Women's Entrepreneur Fund. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what would you say these grants have allowed your businesses, what would you say it has allowed your business to do, like tapping into grants?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I think just kind of maybe just briefly sharing from the last year and a half, really learning how to leverage them properly with just working with Granted is last year, January, we started with some team training around strength finders, which led to then it just started going into what are our values, which then led into identifying, like, we really want to have impact in the work we did. So then again, just sort of like through the learning, something else popped up. And then from there it was recognizing, okay, even in our storytelling as a production company, this idea of what does impact really look like? And I was telling Steph yesterday, like, if a tree falls in a forest and no one heard it or saw it, did it really fall? Does us just making a video really have impact? And so that led us down a direction of, okay, I think we need to pivot and like become more of an agency where we can provide strategic guidance. We can provide campaign planning and be able to provide that distribution to measure that impact. And so that led us on a trajectory of further grants that we applied for to upskill our team in the area of marketing, in the area of management training, in the area of leadership development. I had finished just recently a graduate studies course in values-based leadership at Royal Roads, which again, like that upskill, which I'll talk about maybe a little bit later, increasing that understanding and that vantage point as a leader. Just night and day difference from a year from now, just the understanding of where I see things.
Yeah.
And a couple other things would be like just also with the WEF grant, expanding into other markets, attending conferences outside of the country and building, relationships and friendships, and just blowing up our perspective on what could be and what other businesses are doing as well. And then now with everything with COVID too, it's like using grants to leverage a pivot. In like we can't actually go out and film productions in the same way now, even looking ahead, like what is that going to look like for us? And with our pivot, really, like the strategy and the implementation can be done in a room somewhere. We don't have to, be out there. But also now leveraging the Can Export to pivot to start a new podcast around leadership. And so kind of just, again, like every kind of business decision, there was an element of, okay, well, can grants really apply to that?
Yeah, that's great. And I'm going to ask, why do you think grants are actually important for businesses? Because it could feel like a lot of work. Like, what would you say to women on the call today, the importance of accessing grants?
That's a good question. Okay, so I mean, I think it's super important to invest in yourself, and sometimes it's some things that we already do, but sometimes with a grant, it's like, okay, but it's like that a little extra push. And this is the recognition that you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so, especially with the training grant, like that kind of upskilling is just super critical, to be able to help you see from a different perspective. And then again, because you see from a different perspective, it kind of opens doors and opportunities to things that you may not have considered as part of your growth strategy. Yeah, I don't know if I can expand more on that, but.
No, that's great. And I'm going to ask one last question, which is any tips or lessons about grants that you feel you could share with us today?
Well, I remember we were sitting somewhere 2 years ago, and you said something to me where I would only kind of talk to Steph like once a year, or like, oh, maybe I should apply for a grant. And then, okay, I applied for that grant. Okay, I'll see you next year. And then Steph was like, no. You know, whenever you need to hire, whenever you need to train, or you want to take a course, or when, you want to grow your business some way, you should check in and see if there are grants available for that. That actually needs to be part of your thinking, Donna. And so, so it's kind of over the last 2 years, it's been like, okay, as I plan the year for my company, as I plan how I want to grow, or maybe I'm, planning to hire, there's always this element in the back of my mind now, this parallel thought of, okay, well, where could grants fit in on this? And it's also like a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I'm thinking through, okay, well, what grants could apply? But as I'm going through the grant process, it's also informing other opportunities that might pop up. Or as I'm looking at, okay, well, this grant I could leverage this amount, and how would I? Especially with the WEF grant, it's like I had to plan out like how I was going to plan to use that money. And then you start dreaming, and you start thinking, oh, maybe we could do this and this, and then talking to advisors like Steph, or just people who see from different perspectives. They see other opportunities as well, and it just starts blowing up where you could take your company, which is super exciting. But on the flip side, the work is also hard. Like with the WEF grant, I went in, I kind of hit a cash flow crunch where it's like, okay, I got the grant, 100,000, great. Actually, I need to spend the money first and then reimburse it back. And so just being sure that you have that cash flow plan in place to be able to leverage some of these grants. And I would also say, get professional advice. So I do know, like working with grants is one option, and it's like a grant Sherpa to guide your path. But even if you don't have someone doing the grants for you, to talk to someone to get a lay of the land and just kind of get your bearings is super helpful. Because otherwise, sometimes it feels like pages and pages of stuff you have to look at. And so what's important, what's not important, what you need to hone in on, what will be approved or not approved, just even getting some consulting and guidance before you apply for that grant is going to, I think, make a night and day difference.
Yeah, huge. And, of course we work with a lot of companies, but I will also say all this stuff that we do at Granted, you can actually do yourself. Like it's not, I say that loosely because I've been in grants for 9 years. You can also do your own accounting. And a lot of people on this call today don't do their own accounting. I get it. But once you kind of build a little bit of that acumen, then the next one's a little bit easier and the next one's a little bit easier. So please don't feel like you have to have a grant consultant on your side. There's definitely stages of businesses where you're in a growth mode, or you really hate this stuff and you're just like, I just want someone to do it. Get that. But, also there's a way for you to upskill your staff to be able to build that acumen within your organization so that you're a little bit more agile as well. So I really want to make sure that that's communicated. We're not pitching for Granted at all on this thing. It really is for you guys to be able to access the information. So some of the things that I was on a call yesterday with Donna, just to kind of make sure that we covered and went through some of these questions, like the upskilling of the team members. Just as a business owner from on this side, I think it was the biggest and best investment that I had made, to ensure that my team members had access to the training that they need. And we now have a budget for training every year that gets nicely offset by the employer training grant, or in other provinces, it's Canada Job Grant, because it doesn't just help you think better as a business owner, it helps them think better. And it helps them think bigger. And so that's what you want to have on your team, are people who are like, but what about this? And how about that? And I can do this. And so I really love the training grants for that reason. And then expanding into new market. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just add something to that on the flip side of that?
Yeah.
So I actually started using the grants to train my people on management training. And then, and I just okay, you guys go do it. Okay. I got other things to do. And then next year I was like, okay, no. Okay, now I do this training. And then when I did the training, it was like, hello, why haven't we implemented all these things? You guys did this training a year before me. And so it was just recognizing that, as leaders of our own organization, our people can only really grow to the level that we have grown to. And so for them they can't grow beyond us. And so it's actually really important for us to do the training as well. So just saying.
Yeah. And that's the case. Like, we did a mindfulness course, as I mentioned, and it was everybody in there, because you can't just have some people in the organization that's mindful and then another bunch that's not mindful. That could be a problem.
I wonder if I can just jump in here a bit.
Yeah.
I think the suggestion about the training grants, I've seen that be very useful for clients, because they're kind of ongoing, and it's a way to get grants to do that ongoing and continuous upgrading.
Yeah.
The $100,000 grant that was just for women, I think you sent it earlier at the start of the conversation, but important just to reiterate, Donna was one of 200 of the 4,500 that applied and were successful for that grant. And I think it was very much companies who had the ability to pay the expenses first and then claim reimbursement. And I know of some clients that wanted to apply, and some were successful, but weren't able to pay the costs up front and wait for reimbursement because they didn't have enough working capital. So that was a really specialized one. And yay for Donna, who is ready to go and had everything in place and her business registered properly and sort of was able to tick all the boxes that they were looking for and jump on that opportunity. But it was really, really not, it was unprecedented, I would say. So definitely the ongoing. What's that, Donna?
I was going to give a plug for BDC. I actually didn't have funding in place. And it took me 2 months. All the banks said no. And then I was like, BDC. And then so Steph connected me with BDC, which their mandate is to help entrepreneurs.
Great.
Right outside of that bank, security threshold. So that's how.
Yeah, that's great to know. Good for you. But you also had to qualify with BDC, right? So you still had to have a strong business that could take on that additional debt in order to make it all work. So it's like planting all the seeds and doing things to prepare that when the opportunity comes up, you're ready to jump on it.
Yeah.
So that was great. Very good.
Okay. Yeah. And, just on what I love about women entrepreneurs is not always putting other people first, but then not really working on themselves very much. So I really wanted to highlight a couple of things that I noticed on a personal level that I've seen Donna and her company been able to do. And obviously, when you are investing in your business, the risk is, do I put my own savings into it? And then do I borrow against my car and my house? And so grants actually help to offset that from what I could see for some of the projects that she was doing. It also allowed her to have, give her company a little bit of an edge and be able to pivot when it's required. And so it's a different mindset shift, I think, is kind of what it is. And that's what Donna was alluding to in terms of planning things out. So I'm actually going to skip the scams slide for now. I'm just going to talk a little bit about having a strategy, because I feel like that's actually really important to a good transition into this. So you should always have a plan and a strategy. I'm not saying you have to write your business plan over again. I know it's painful. I know. But definitely have a 1-page plan. What are you guys looking to do in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months? What are you looking to do? What are the buckets that you guys are wanting to check off in, quarter by quarter? And then what you should do is understand that grants are not about the now. So as you do different things, there will be grant opportunities throughout the year. And so it's very important. I get this all the time where people will call us up and they'll say, hey, tell me what are the list of grants? And there might not be anything right there and then that is exactly a match. And then they're like, okay, yeah, I'll call you when I'm doing, you know, hiring or when training. And honestly, by that time, they're behind. Because once some of these grants, like the employee training grant that we spoke about and other grants I've seen as well, they go in hours. So now they've made some changes to it. But if you aren't ready and you're waiting and you don't know what you don't know, which was another piece of advice from Donna, you are gonna be behind. So it's really important that you guys do your grant research throughout the year. Don't make assumptions about things. Maybe if there's a hiring grant that pops up in April, but you were going to hire in June, should you be looking at that grant in April because now it's covering 50% of the wages for the next 9 months? Or are you going to wait until June and maybe there's no grant then? So there's that forward thinking. It's a little bit of a play and it does take some work. Like it's not just, you know, everything's there for you. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that because it was a good transition.
Yeah,
And so one of the things that Danielle mentioned to me was like, geez, Steph, like there's a lot of information out there, but then what about these grant scams and these pitfalls? So I'm going to say this. I don't know so much that the word scam is correct, but I found the image for it, so I used it. It's more so on the facade of a grant. So one of the grants I'm going to bring up, and I know this is recorded, so I got to be careful, but there is a grant out there that says submit your business plan, and there could be $30,000, $50,000, or $70,000 available for you. Okay, and I think they've evolved over time. I got to tell you, Granted was born for two reasons in 2010 as an idea in my head, and I registered in 2011. One was me digging deep on that particular grant and verifying where are they getting the funds. It's not a government grant, so where are they getting it? And then I found out it's from business plan writers. And I went, what? But then think about it. You write a business plan, it's not good enough. They refer you to a business plan writer, and then the money goes back to them. Is that a scam? I don't know. It's a facade. Okay, I'm going to call it a facade. And so I really kind of want to make sure, so knowing and digging that, and my background is also, I am a daughter of a CRA agent. So I dig deep. Like I go and find that needle in a haystack and I don't take no for an answer because I know I can audit because I've experienced audit through my entire life for various things from my mom. And so I will say that like, it was really shocking to me that this organization was able to do what they do and no one was even, and so then these poor people who are starting up their business are paying $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for a business plan they probably don't even need, and they may not get the grant. That's the shitty thing about it, right? So that's one thing. Unreliable sites. Oh, sorry. The second reason I was born, that Granta was born, was because of the economic downturn in 2008. So I know the types of programs that likely the government will be pushing out. We were in a conservative government when it was 2008. Now we're in a liberal government. You guys have seen how liberal the liberals have been with funding. So be prepared and expect that there might not be more on the COVID side, but the economic recovery is expected. So just for stats, in the conservative government for the 2008, which is obviously a completely different scenario, but it was an economic downturn. It was about 53 billion in terms of support. We're already at 150 billion or something close to that. And so you're seeing 3 times. And so I think that the government has to be a little bit careful in terms of how the funding is being dispersed and making sure there's compliance there to protect taxpayers, because it's all our dollars, honestly, or will be in the future. We have to pay it back in some way, but just making sure that you know what that is. But I do feel that I have some insights just based on my experience with the 2008 and the programs that were born out, because I came back from Taiwan and I was shocked how many businesses did not know that they could apply for grants. I was shocked because in Asia, we were applying for millions of dollars, US dollars of grants for a company I was working for. And I came back and I'm like, you can get a grant for that. You can get a grant for that. They're like, no, you can't. I'm like, prove me wrong. Okay, so I'm going to find it. And so I found it and they applied, and that's literally how Granta was born. So the other thing is unreliable sites. I hit this as well. I looked at some of these sites. They look like government sites. They're not really. So they want to lure you in and like, hey, talk to us or whatever it is. So instead of fighting that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to build something that gives free information. And so we have, Get Granted as our technology, and it gives you a list of free grants. Now, if you want the bells and whistles of those grants, what are the best practices, you know, what's the eligibility criteria, you want information being sent to you, that's a paid service. But getting a list of grants is free. It is on, you know, sorry, I'm going to skip this slide, but it's on the Innovation Canada site, which Innovation Canada has this business support site. I don't love how the site is set up. Some of you guys may have been on it. It's a good site. It's not a great site. So a lot of the stuff is like, it links you to the program. You then have to read the 40-page application guide. And probably by the time you even, like, there's a lot of information on there. There's some that's grants, there's some that's loans, there's business resources, some that you don't qualify for. So I will tell you that I was pretty judgy about them, you know, just like, it doesn't do everything. And then when I went to build the technology, I'm like, I see why it doesn't, you know, have everything. So that's an excellent free resource, but know that the work still needs to be done to understand what these are. And the notifications that they get have been a little bit hit and miss in my experience, okay? We built Get Granted, which matches grants to your business, and it will notify you when there are grants that pop up that match your profile. So if you're only looking at hiring grants, it will only send you hiring grants. So that's another resource. Again, it's a freemium model if you just want your list of grants, and you can just check back in on a regular basis. But if you want the details of it, that's available to you as well. And we have things like best practices because we know where companies have fallen. Okay, let's see. So I think that's it on my end. I mean, I want to encourage you guys. I hate leaving webinars where you don't know what your next steps are. So homework, search for a grant, any grant, whether it be a COVID program, whether it be a hiring program or the training grant. Read about it, understand it. If there's a place to get notifications from that department, and that's what Melanie was alluding to a little bit, is how do you build that relationship? Get on those mailing lists. You don't have to look at every single newsletter that they give you, but if you see the word grant or funding or new or whatever, they're going to probably, right? You could also follow, you know, you don't have to do emails. You could also follow them on LinkedIn or follow them on Twitter and get the notifications that way. And then just apply. Just get out there and actually start putting an application together. And it's a little bit like doing your taxes for the first time. Like at the end of it, you kind of go, oh, that wasn't too bad. Or you go in, or you call an accountant immediately after and like get scared about that. So it could go either way. I'm not going to say that it's a total easy process, but you're getting free money. So it shouldn't be an easy process. Do we agree with that? Like as taxpayers, if it was that easy, I was shocked about how easy that Canada Emergency Business account was. 3 check boxes. That was great because they need to get the money out. But I got to tell you, that is not how grants work. That wage subsidy one, whoever's going to join on for the wage subsidy webinar that I'm doing next, it's a doozy. I was saying this to the ladies earlier today. So just be really careful. Okay.
We have a lot of questions, so
I know, go
for questions. Yeah. So I just want to say a couple of things based on what you've talked about, which is just like fantastic contact and fantastic information. And I'm just really excited. This is recorded for people who miss it live. But a couple of things, the facades and the scams, there are some out there, they are still happening. You know, just recently I talked to someone who had paid $3,000 thinking that she was going to get business back from that, and she never got business back from that. So kind of a grant program, or someone who's paid $800 because they want this grant and they never got anything out of it. They never heard anything afterwards. So they're out there, and we're always really concerned, and basically say, well, there's not grants for women starting businesses, but there's lots of grants for everything else. And so do your homework and find the information. The second thing is, so people can go onto your website, register for an account, and get access for free to all the grants. Is that correct?
Well, our coverage is over Western Canada, so we cover the federal grants and provincial up to Manitoba. This year likely we'll be looking at Ontario as well, but yes, that is the case. I've also sent a coupon code that I think will go out to all the participants because I like to reward people who show up. And you guys have all shown up. So one grant for you and one grant for you. That's where Granted came from, is from Oprah. Like you get granted and you get granted and you get granted. So let's make sure that wealth gets spread to everybody on this call.
Great. That's really great. Thank you so much. That's very generous of you, Stephanie. And I know you do great work. And Dawn is evidence of your great work and that she was successful in getting one of those Women Entrepreneurship Strategy grants. So maybe Danielle, do you want to jump into the questions? Because there's lots of great questions.
Here we go. Quick fire questions. Here we
Go for it.
So Catherine says, my company does not have payroll as I'm the founder and do not draw payroll, so I don't qualify for any of the COVID support. Is there anything out there for me?
Yeah, you would personally be able to apply for the CURB program. So that is the, I'm going to talk CERB, so Canadian,
Yep.
So CERB, not CURB. So it's the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit or something like that.
Yep, that's right.
And so that one would be the $2,000. You could even do, if you were to put yourself on payroll, you might be able to qualify for at least another top up of $1,000. That's definitely one program that you could leverage. I'm also going to say that solopreneurs, and Mel, jump in if you feel that this is incorrect, but solopreneurs and general partnerships do qualify for BDC funding. And they've got some really, staggering interest rates. And I should also maybe even point to WEC on this. Like, absolutely, as you guys have been supported or gaining support through some of these COVID programs, ensuring that businesses have greater access. So you don't have to be an incorporated business that's been established for, a huge number of years, but you do have to prove some pre-COVID success. So before COVID hit, were you guys successful? Meaning, were you at least profitable? Or able to break even is a great way. And what are you doing now in the next 6 months to prepare for more? So maybe you're pivoting. I know a company that was in technology and now they're selling masks. I mean, God, if BDC doesn't support that, we're not going to get those 5 million masks. So those are things that are happening. And I think it's important to not just, so here's a tip for everybody. Any loan program right this second for COVID, do not just say, I'm just doing the same thing as before. If you put that down, the chances of you getting approved is like, you have to be, are you cutting costs? Are you putting in a little bit more time and effort and maybe some in-kind time on your side? Are you talking to your suppliers and asking them to extend your payment terms? What are you doing so that the government can actually support the fact that they have to give you, or that they want to give you more money? So those are kind of a couple of the programs that I would speak on. If you are in technology, the IRAP program is taking applications until April 29th. It's a 1-week term. It's kind of like the WEF. It's kind of crazy. Get your application in. And so there's thousands of companies applying for that. There also was in a phone call I was on this morning, there's a community futures or something like that, where if you don't qualify, it's regional development funding. So Western Diversification is running it in Western Canada. If you don't qualify for some of these other things, you can go to them and they will figure out what support looks like. I can't guarantee it's grant money or non-repayable. I can tell you that it is support. So it could be funding of some sort of loans.
Yeah, so I can just jump in with that. So definitely Women's Enterprise Center, we have our loan program up to $150,000. So if you're not qualifying for any of the government programs, as Stephanie says, you put together your cash flow projections and your growth plan or your recovery plan, whatever you're planning to do, and submit an application to Women's Enterprise Center. So Community Futures, they did receive regional funding. Like a lot of the announcements by the government, they are no details yet. They're discussing now, they have this bucket of money and now how is that going to be given out? So Community Futures and Western Diversification, and we are hoping to get some of that money because we're hoping it might have a grant piece in it. With Women's Enterprise Center, our loan program doesn't have a grant piece. So it would be nice if we could offer that. But definitely we are looking at how to support those businesses that don't qualify for the emergency business account.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. It sometimes is not on the grant on the onset. As you guys saw with some of these programs, they will forgive a portion. So that's actually a very interesting play. They want to make sure that you're spending the money and you are going to pay it back, and they give you an incentive to pay it back early. So that's that. Danielle, go off to you now.
Yes, we'll see how many questions we can get through. So a couple questions about hiring grants. So Laura says, I'm very interested in learning more about accessing hiring grants. I'm specifically interested in for new immigrants and youth. Could you please shed some light on where I can go research them? And if And I'm also going to ask the second hiring question so we can get that one
Sure.
done too. So Kata says, I'm a fitness studio owner and run the whole thing by myself. Can I get a training grant for myself to say get marketing and basic accounting training for that? So
Yeah.
those are two.
Those two? Okay. So on the hiring grant side of things, where you could look is absolutely look at Get Granted. Just get your list from us. We update it on a daily basis. So that's something that you can look at. The government site's good as well. So you could look at Innovation Canada and see what would be eligible. Currently, because the government fiscal year has passed. So for those who know, March 31st is a government fiscal year. We don't go in a calendar year. So April 1st is usually when there's a new government fiscal budget. And now there's no budget because COVID happened and they pushed the budget. So a lot of the hiring grants are expected to come forth once COVID relief is kind of on there's some recovery there. And then they'll be able to look at some of these hiring grants. So those programs are usually federal. And I would just keep your eye out for it. Like whether you use a subscription with Get Granted or you go back to and bookmark some of these sites. There's ones for Career Launcher. A lot of these programs are also, the bigger ones are industry specific. So if you're just looking for an administrative assistant, it might be a little bit more challenging. If there's some technical component to their job, it helps to upskill them while they're working with you. So that's something to consider. Get Youth Working is another excellent program, $2,800 for youth under the age of 29. They just have to work 30 hours a week. We've seen some flexibility in terms of how they're running the program because of COVID as well. Co-op programs, there's an Innovate BC program. So there's a bunch out there. Get your list from Get Granted. I'm going to say that. It's free. Take it. Google everything. It is free. You can pay. If you don't want to pay, then just Google it. I'm okay with that. Like just copy it and move it in there. The more people that get grants, the more well, I mean, honestly, like women got to help women, right? So that's what I'm here to do. Yeah.
Awesome.
So second part of the question, Danielle, answer is yes. You do have to qualify for the fitness studio where you have been in existence for a year. And what do they look at? Your registration through the corporate registry. So either you're a sole prop or a general partner or whatever. So just because you have a GST number does not mean you're registered properly in BC. So make sure you have that because they do, and many of these grants you have to have been around for at least a year, and been around meaning your registration date shows a year before you qualify. But that's what marketing training, no problem. You could even get yoga training. I tell people that most companies can't get yoga training, but fitness studios can. So you'll go and do some like Kundalini yoga training course, and that might get you ready to go for recovery.
There's a question here. I'll just jump in, Danielle. What Royal Roads training did that Donna mentioned? Donna, in your presentation.
I did
did you get a grant to take the program?
I did get a grant. It's a graduate program. It's a certificate on values-based leadership, and it was about a 6,000 for it was 3 courses that comprised of a certificate. And I'm actually going to look into doing more, actually, and just move it towards getting a master's in executive leadership. It's like I'll just hit a niche interest point. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I am looking at the time. We've got 10:57. There are 14 unanswered questions. So there's a couple different approaches. We could look at these on, and send a follow-up email with some additional resources. It just goes to show how relevant this is and how many questions there are about grants. So in the nature of time, let's flip over back to our screen and wrap up the session. Okay. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Not yet. Oh.
Okay. Share. How's that? Can you see that?
Great. Yes, we can see that
yes.
now. Okay. So.
So these are our other upcoming sessions that everyone can check out. Obviously, we've moved everything on webinars, so they're free. We've got really great experts on this, on these different topics, and the registrations are always through our website. And yeah, so let me just go to the next slide here. So Melanie, I'll let you wrap up and do our thank yous.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much, Stephanie and Donna too. On behalf of our participants, I want to give you both a great thank you and appreciation for all the great information that you've provided and just being able to answer so many questions. So that was really helpful. Just want to make sure that people know there'll be a follow-up email with a link to provide feedback on the session, and we hope you'll share your thoughts with us. We're always striving to improve the sessions to meet your needs, so whatever topic you're interested in. We'll also share the resources, and don't forget the special offer that Stephanie's generously given to people who attended the workshop, this session here. Our next forum is May the 6th, and we'll discuss SEO for beginners and how to find your customers online. And on May 14th, we'll be discussing blogging for business. We also on Fridays have a weekly strength in numbers sessions where we talk about specific COVID-19 resources and responses and answer your questions. So goodbye everybody, and thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again Stephanie and Donna and Danielle also for helping to keep things running smoothly. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. Bye guys.
Thank you.
Bye.